different kind of leadership right now. We do need to be inspired because our souls are broken. Broken. We've lost our way. And the only person in this race that I think has a chance of moving us in a way that we have never seen in my lifetime is Barack Obama. And I say that not because I'm his wife. Because remember what I told you? This is hard. There is another option that is better for us than this. But remember what I told you, we don't have a choice. And knowing the kind of character that this man has and the potential that he has to change the face of this world, whatever sacrifice we have to make means nothing. It is about character. Barack Obama will be an outstanding president, not because of what he's done, but because of who he is. And my father has always told me that you measure the character of a man not by what he does when everyone is watching. When he or she decides to be president, I don't care what you did then. What did you do when no one was looking? When you were in the shadows? When it didn't count? What were your choices? And that's where Barack stands out, and hopefully that's where you'll stand out in your life. And every time you have to make an important decision about life, do you make it for a greater good? And that's who Barack is. And it started by how he was raised. And most people don't know Barack was the product of the single-parent household. His mother was this 18-year-old white woman raising a black kid. And it was Barack at that, so it's like, sheesh. So at some level, she was a dreamer. She was naive. She believed that this little girl from Kansas could travel the world and go to places like Indonesia and work with women's issues. And as a result of her naivete, a lot of times they lived on food stamps, but Barack also got to see the world in a way that most Americans do not. Living in other cultures that are vastly different from ours and learning to respect them and understand them without fear. Learning what global poverty looks like up close and personal. See, it's one thing to understand poverty when you're watching it on TV, and it's another thing to have a grandmother who lives in a small village in Siam, who is in the midst of a struggle. That's a different perspective. See, Barack knows that a nation like ours can have positive and negative impacts on small villages across oceans. And I just think, imagine a president of the United States who brings that kind of sensibility to the Oval Office. I have never seen that in my lifetime. That's a difference that should matter. But Barack was also raised by two grands, these maternal grandparents, folks who he saw sacrifice. The only difference between his grandparents and my parents was race, because their values were the same. What we learned growing up in our households was things like truth matters, that your word counts. Honesty does mean a whole lot. When you say you're going to do something, you do it, and you do it to the best of your ability. That you treat other people with decency and respect, even if you don't know them or you don't agree with them. That when you're just a regular kid growing up, you don't expect anything. You don't feel entitled to anything. You know you have to work harder, be smarter, be quicker than everybody. But you do it. And there's nothing more important in this world than your commitment to your family and your community. Those are the values that I married. That's why I married this man. And ladies, let me tell you, look around. Because brothers can talk a good game. But you want to know, what are they doing, young men? What are you doing with those values? Barack was trying to live by them every step of the way. So when he graduated from college, instead of going to Wall Street and paying down his debt, he worked as a community organizer. The first major decision he had to make in his life. Working with folks who had a reason to be cynical about life, folks who had reason to give up hope because they had been forgotten. Their streets were unsafe. Their schools were underfunded. He spent years working with folks, busing them down to City Hall, helping them find their voice. I've never seen a president of the United States that can boast that kind of experience in my lifetime. There's no other front-runner in this race who has done that kind of work on the street. But in America, we value the fact that you run a big corporation and you made a whole lot of money. And I don't understand that. In a country like ours, I would just imagine that before you open up your mouth to say you want to be president of the United States, you should demonstrate commitment on the ground to people. Barack is also one of the smartest men you'll meet. He's a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, everybody's a lawyer. Hopefully, all you all won't be lawyers, but it's okay. But everybody in this race is a lawyer. Most of them made millions before they decided to be president. And even though Barack was the first African-American president of the Harvard Law Review, and for those of you who understand what that means you were the best law student in the best school in the world. And you can write your ticket for any amount anywhere. What did Barack do? He worked in a small civil rights firm in Chicago, and became a constitutional law scholar. Why? Because what we learned growing up was to whom much is given, much is expected. And when you are blessed, even if your blessings are small like ours was, like you had people who were sacrificing for you, that you knew you owed for those blessings. So Barack knew that if you've got the talents of advocacy, you don't sell them to the highest bidder, you work on issues of justice. Worked on housing discrimination, employment discrimination, voting rights. Went into the state Senate, not to amass power for himself, but to work on issues of change, hard issues that are not popular. Things like racial profiling. He helped expand health care for kids in our state, passed and earned income tax credits. Worked on racial profiling. These aren't issues that you take on because you want to be popular, especially not in Illinois. Illinois is one of the toughest, meanest political states in this union. But Barack was successful not because he became a part of that system, but because he rose above it. His view to politics was, let me see what happens if I tell the truth. If I'm honest, if I work really hard, if I build relations with people across party lines and across race. If I listen and treat people with respect even when we disagree, can I get stuff done? And the answer was absolutely. Most of the work Barack did was in the minority. And Barack is one of the most respected politicians in the state of Illinois because of his values. So values matter. Judgment and wisdom matter. And as far as I'm concerned, it matters more than how many years you've been in Washington, which is what a lot of his opponents will say. See, but if you want an example of how judgment and wisdom can make a difference, we need only look at the war in Iraq. We are in a war right now because of fear. We are in a war in Iraq right now because folks didn't have the courage to stand out and speak against the war. We are in a war in Iraq right now where a whole lot of people with years of Washington experience talked to one another and stayed in their world and looked at their facts. And they looked up and they were mad, and they knew the country was mad. And they wanted tough, and we liked tough, so we said, we're going to war. The only candidate who's a front runner in this race who spoke out when it wasn't popular and it wasn't convenient to be against the war was Barack. And he did it at a time that wasn't convenient for him. His opponents won't tell you this. They'll say, well, he wasn't in the U.S. Senate, so he didn't have to cast a vote. Well, let me tell you where Barack was. He was running to get to the U.S. Senate. He was in his own tough 7-way primary race that he wasn't supposed to win, because you know what they said about him in Illinois? They said, he can't do this. They said he's too young. They said he's too inexperienced. They said he can't raise the money. They said he can't build a political organization. Does this sound familiar? They said he was too black. They said he wasn't black enough. They said his name was funny. They tried to make people afraid of his name. They said there's no way that white folks in downstate Illinois will vote for a man named Barack Obama. They said it all. We've heard it all before. But the important lesson for me in that is that in that midst of all that fear-mongering and that negativity, Barack still stood tall. His test was, let me see what happens if I tell people what I really think, which is the war is wrong. There is no evidence of weapons of mass destruction. It will cost us millions of dollars and thousands of lives. And you know what? Barack still won his U.S. Senate seat. He won it by 50% of the vote or more, and he won every category throughout the state. You know why? Because folks can handle the truth. We can handle the truth, people, if we hear it. The question in this race and the question in your lives is not whether Barack is ready. It's not whether you're ready. Barack is ready, and trust me, if anybody tells you you're not ready, you tell them where to go.